Robbie Forgotten, Chapter 13. Robbie couldn't fall asleep. The image of Sportacus's face kept floating up in his mind, how his smile had fallen just before he left. The look on his face had been there for only a second, but Robbie had seen it. A look of doubt, or worse, disappointment. Robbie couldn't recall a time he'd ever seen the man look like that before. Sportacus had assured Robbie that he'd done nothing wrong. So why did he feel like he had? The questions Sportacus asked him had caught him off guard. They were questions he hadn't even asked of himself before. But with one stilted conversation, Robbie had the answers, whether he wanted them or not. He just didn't understand why. Why wasn't he happy with things how they were now? All the evidence in his lair pointed to a past that was lonely and wretched. With the loss of his memory, he'd gained so much more in return, a vibrant life full of food and fun and friends. He had a best friend, maybe even the best friend. After all, who wouldn't want their best friend to be a superhero? But then, why would Sportacus want his best friend to be him? Robbie rolled one way and turned another, bundled up in the sheets and blankets that made up his makeshift bed, sheets and blankets that Sportacus had donated to him. The treehouse creaked with his movement, and he could feel it sway gently in the branches. It almost felt like the time he'd stayed in the airship, and the ship had rocked a little even while anchored. The sensation only disturbed him more. Robbie opened the hatch and climbed down the ladder in the dark. As hot as it got during the summer days, the nights were brisk, and he shivered when he reached the ground. He rubbed his arms and walked out of the park. There was only one place he could think where he could go. It was colder down there, but it had a big furry recliner with his name on it. Robbie didn't really expect that he would be able to sleep down in the lair, but come the next morning he was surprised to find that he had, a deep and dreamless sleep. When he awoke, he had no sense of time. Without any clocks or windows letting in natural sunlight, it was impossible for him to guess how long he'd slept. He knew he ought to get back above ground before he was missed, but the truth was he didn't really want to. He took his time getting out of the recliner and pottered around, getting an early start on his most recent pastime of exploring the bunker. It was in this way that Robbie discovered he had a periscope. Or it may have been more accurate to say the periscope found him. He was just standing at the control console on the catwalk, trying to figure out how to get the silky-looking pajamas out of one of the disguise tubes, when all of a sudden something big and heavy crashed down on his head with a clang. It took him a minute to regain his senses, and a few seconds more to determine the roof wasn't caving in. In fact, Robbie could see there were lots of things suspended up in the crossbeams besides the speakers and the TV set. Things like chalkboards and signs and all sorts of strange devices. All of them likely designed to fall down on top of him at the slightest provocation, too. But that didn't matter right now. Now he had a periscope. And it was no ordinary periscope. The instrument had to be incredibly long for it to extend all the way down into the bunker where he could operate it. To peer into the viewport and suddenly see the bright glare of morning while deep underground was almost enough to blind Robbie. It wasn't only the sun glare, proof that he had slept all night, that had him shocked. It was the fact that, somehow, much like a lot of the other bizarre machines down in the lair, the periscope defied all logic and reason and was showing Robbie a view of the opposite side of LazyTown. He had a clear view of the town hall as though he were standing right in front of it. Robbie pushed the periscope up above his head, rubbed his eyes, then pulled it back down. When he looked into it again, the location had changed, and he stared through the lens at the community garden. He leaned in closer, wanting to see more. The playground, the town square, Lazy Park. Robbie could see everything everywhere in LazyTown through this incredible instrument. Robbie's roving eyes stumbled across some of the kids on the sports field. They appeared so close to the viewer that Robbie jumped back from the lens. Gingerly he went back to take a second look. The view hadn't changed, still holding on the children. They were tossing a football back and forth to each other, and when one of them spoke, Robbie was shocked to discover that he could hear what they were saying. Not through the big metal speakers tucked away and dormant up in the ceiling, but through the periscope itself, slightly muffled and tinny like a radio. Ziggy was looking around everywhere but at the football, and didn't even try to catch it as it whizzed over his head. "Where is he? The morning's almost over. He's usually come down by now." "Do you think he's still at home?" Stephanie asked as she retrieved the ball. "He was acting a little funny last night. Maybe he caught a cold." It didn't seem like the kids had noticed the periscope popping up in their midst. Robbie kept still as he watched and listened to them, not wanting to do anything that might give himself away. It would be hard to explain to them what he was doing if they realized he was spying. But it wasn't like he was spying on purpose now, was he? He couldn't help it if he was curious as to their conversation. "Maybe we should go see if he's okay," Ziggy asked. "How are we supposed to do that?" Trixie scoffed. "It's not like we can just go knock on his door, unless you're going to grow a pair of wings and fly up there." Robbie stiffened slightly, his face still glued to the periscope. Were they talking about Sportacus? "We can write him a letter," Stephanie said, and left the game of catch to fetch her purse from the edge of the field. The other kids left the football behind them to go join the pink girl as she ripped a page out of her diary and uncapped her pen. She only took a moment to scribble a quick note before rolling it up. "Come on, guys, let's send it right away." Altogether they ran out of the sports field, and Robbie lurched into the viewport in his eagerness to follow along with them. It only made the periscope swing up and around, and he almost went head over heels off the catwalk, if not for his iron grip on the handles of the viewer. Feeling an odd weight settle in his stomach, Robbie yanked the periscope back into position and panned rapidly across town to see where the children had gone to. He found them near the town center now, swarming around the mailbox. It wasn't the mailbox they were interested in, though. Stephanie pulled a familiar-looking metal canister out and slipped her letter inside before inserting the capsule into a large chute affixed to the ground beside the normal mail receptacle. She grabbed hold of the lever coming off of it next and gave it one big tug. There was a crisp whoomph, and Robbie only had time to see the blur of that mail capsule shooting straight up into the air like a bottle rocket. The kids shielded their eyes as they followed the letter's trajectory. Robbie couldn't get the periscope to tilt at that extreme of an angle, no matter how much he pulled and heaved on it. Still, he suspected he knew where it was going. Minutes passed while they waited. Stephanie leaned back against the mailbox and crossed her arms. Trixie kicked a few rocks across the street, and Ziggy pulled a lollipop out of his pocket, upon which he gave a few anxious nibbles. And Robbie stood at his periscope down in his lair, waiting with them. A shadow fell over the children, and they looked back up, their expressions brightening in the shade. The airship had arrived, coming to a pause right over the mailbox. The spindly rope ladder unfurled next, and within moments a bright blue-suited man jumped down to land among the kids. "Hi, guys," Sportacus said. "Did you need something?" None of the children replied. They were too surprised, all looking up at Sportacus as he was. Robbie felt the weight in his stomach constrict as he, too, saw the hero. The man's eyes drooped with the hints of bags under them. He lacked his usual smile upon greeting the kids. Even his mustache appeared to wilt. His posture, too, was off, his shoulders slightly slack instead of squared proudly, his arms hanging loosely instead of propped up akimbo in his more engaging pose. It was so unlike him to look so unpolished, and he didn't seem to realize it as he looked from one child to the other. Stephanie was the one who broke the unintended silence. "We were just worried when we didn't see you all morning. Where have you been?" Sportacus blinked his eyes a few times, unable to dispel the shadows under them, and gazed around himself. He scratched his head. "Sorry, guys, I was just in the airship. I didn't realize it was this late already." "Were you sleeping?" Ziggy asked with open disbelief. Sportacus always rose early to do his morning exercise routine. "No," Sportacus said. "I guess I got distracted trying to figure something out." Figure what out? Stephanie asked. Again, Sportacus lagged behind in his response, while the question hung there. He shook his head. Have any of you seen Robbie today? He asked. Robbie? The kids blanked at the inquiry. He's not here either. Sportacus's eyebrows drew together. I see. Well, if you do, try to be extra nice to him, will you? The request earned curious looks all around. Is he okay? Stephanie asked. Is he sick or something? He wasn't feeling very good yesterday, Sportacus said. I might have upset him, and I don't know if I can help him feel better this time. The kids looked at each other as they grappled with the idea that their slightly above-average hero could be the cause of someone's troubles rather than the solution. Did you and Robbie fight? Trixie asked. No, Sportacus said. At least, I don't think so. Maybe we can help, Stephanie said, gesturing around. Why don't we throw him a surprise party? Everyone likes surprises. Good idea, Pinky, Trixie said. Maybe a little scare will get Robbie's head right. Can we have games at the party? Ziggy asked. And cookies? And music, Stephanie said. And we'll make sure everyone is there to cheer him up. The other kids chimed in their support, already getting excited. Sportacus nodded now and then while the kids started planning the festivities, but he didn't speak any more. His eyes drifted off of them, going somewhere far away. That was, until he noticed the periscope. A flash of surprise crossed Sportacus's face, his eyes widening. Robbie felt a jolt, as though their eyes were actually meeting, although it was impossible. He jerked the periscope up and out of the way and ducked down, his heart pounding at being caught. But Sportacus couldn't possibly know it was him, could he? How could Sportacus possibly think it was anyone but him? Fighting against a cringe, Robbie inched the periscope back down until he could peer into it. To his relief, he saw the kids were leaving. Sportacus lingered a moment longer, his wandering gaze searching around, but the periscope was nowhere near so exposed this time, and he couldn't see it. The blue-suited man let out a sigh and climbed the ladder back up to his airship. Robbie pushed the periscope back up. His stomach had turned into one big knot, a confusing tangle. There was something touching in the kid's eagerness to throw a party in his honor. At the same time, there already swelled a sense of dread at the prospect of a noisy celebration with everyone expecting him to smile and wave, play games, and be grateful. The party wasn't really what had him feeling queasy. It was seeing Sportacus, his face so similar to how he'd looked when he departed the previous evening. The way he'd tiptoed around the kid with his explanations made him seem so timid and unsure, not at all like the hero he was supposed to be. Robbie may not have been entirely happy with things how they were, but that didn't mean he'd wanted Sportacus to be unhappy too. If anything, it just made him feel worse. He could just stay where he was. The kids wouldn't be able to find him down in the lair, and they wouldn't be able to throw him the party. The party could be for Sportacus instead, maybe. It seemed like the blue man needed it more than he did. No. Robbie set his jaw and made himself stand up straight. He was supposed to be Sportacus's best friend, and how had he shown that so far? He refused to let the man see his home again, wouldn't share any of the things he'd found for himself, and denied any happiness to either of them. No more. He needed to figure out how to make this right. He would find something down here that would make both of them happy.